Okay, so a couple quick points before we begin. My intention, Bez Hashem, is I think every fourth or fifth shiur I'll decide. The first 10 or 15 minutes, I'm just going to chazer over the bullet points of the previous shiurim just to help it to not get too overwhelming. So today is going to be a little different. I was sort of struggling with, do I want to, I know it's a Semicha program, so I want to move. But the purpose of this, and I think what makes this a little separate from other programs, is I want to make it as practical as we can, as super, super practical. So we did mention last week a couple halachas that while we could have just quickly gone through, I decided instead of me just saying them out, even though I kind of mentioned them last week, I want to read them inside with you. And that's the sheets today I printed out sheets. Normally the sheets are just like the Shulchan Aruch Shach and Taz, Pischei Tshuva, that's on the page. For those that don't have a Shulchan Aruch, this week it's different. These are all random marmakaimis that are related to what we did last week, because I want to sort of show a little bit of the evolution of how the psak works. So last week the Mechaber had mentioned that you're allowed to take dogim, you're allowed to take fish and cook it in milk. The Mechaber said it's mutter. It's not a problem of basar b'challah. Fish is not meat. We mentioned last week that the Taz and the Shach bring down that the Beis Yosef, not in the Shulchan Aruch, but in the Beis Yosef, he mentioned that the same way you don't eat fish and meat together because it's dangerous, it causes saras, so too fish and milk also should be avoided for medical reasons. And as we saw from the Shach and Taz, they said that it was a tos. It was a mistake in the printer, or the Beis Yosef wrote the wrong word. There is no source in Shas. There is a source not to have fish and meat, but there's no source not to have fish and milk. And we spoke about that. So I just want to mention about the fish and meat. I'm not going to go through all of it because there is a Siman in Shulchan Aruch and Yeridei, Siman Kuf Tes Zayin, where the Shulchan Aruch dedicates a whole half a Siman to things that are dangerous, and one of them is fish and meat. So I'm not going to go through all the details, but I mentioned Shaila about Worcestershire sauce, and I decided I said it, and you could trust me, I think I said it properly, but let's go through it together. What you have in front of you, in the top is Basar v'dogim. This is actually printed from the Tshuvas. It's printed from the sheets. It's called the OU documents. The OU documents it's a chaval that it's not more public. The OU has sort of, when they make a policy, the Rabbanim, the main Rabbanim are Shechter and Rebelsky, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha, and Yibadl Ben Chaim L'Chaim Rav Shechter, Shlita. So when they make a decision, a shaila is posed to them, they write a tshuva, and based on that tshuva is the policy of the OU. And you could find documents. Someone, when I was in yeshiva, sent me a whole Google Drive of random documents. I haven't been able to find any of them, but I happen to have this one. This is a tshuva, I think it's officially F24, but it's just kedai to go through. And this was a shaila and tshuva that they asked Rav Belsky and Rav Shechter about Worcestershire sauce. Worcestershire sauce is a sauce that has anchovies in it, so it is a sauce, but it's labeled a steak sauce. So fish and meat are not allowed to be together. Forget about fish and milk. That's a separate shaila. That we talk about maybe a toast. Fish and meat is for sure a problem. It causes saras. So is it a problem that the OU is giving a hechsher to fish and meat? Not really fish and meat, but they're giving a hechsher to Worcestershire sauce, which is labeled as a steak sauce, so it's going to be placed on it. So Rav Shechter says, like the Shaila was asked to him, "Mutter lahanig hechsher Worcestershire sauce? Are you able to give a hechsher to Worcestershire sauce? Sheish by ma'at tam dog. There's a little bit of fish in it. It's not a 60th; it's even less. So it is nullified within the tube itself. Elishu bevadei botel b'shishim umishtamshin b'sauce hazeh b'chdei lahatim basar b'shas b'shulai, and they put it on steaks." Although he says that they use it when they're cooking, but even if they weren't putting on their cooking, even if they were just dipping meat into it, even cold, that would be a problem. Fish and meat are not allowed to be together. So is it a problem? How could the OU give a hechsher to something that's a halachic problem? So tshuva, this is the response from Rav Shechter. Das HaMagen Avram, he begins by saying that you should know that while fish and meat is a problem, it's not a Kabbalistic issue. Although the Mechaber says you shouldn't do it, this is a medical concern. The fish and meat together causes medical problems. And therefore, the Magen Avram, who is in the 1600s, so 100 years after the Mechaber, the Magen Avram said, Lefakvek, he started to question this. Veloimar, De'ulei bezman hazeh yesh lamed neshanu atvim. There is such a concept that when you deal with medical things, the medicine changes, bodies change, climate changes things. And says the Magen Avram already that although the Mechaber says it's a problem to have fish and meat, I'm not so convinced that it's a problem, because he says, I spoke to doctors, and again, this is not a Kabbalistic issue where you could say, well, once it's Kabbalah, okay, leave it. There was a Sefer Teres Chesed of Lublin, he felt that it is, but Pashtus, it's a medical problem. So says the Magen Avram, if it's a medical problem, I don't think it's a medical problem anymore. And therefore, I don't think it's such an issue. And this Shita of the Magen Avram is actually quoted by the Mishnah Berurah. Now, we don't paskin like the Magen Avram fully, because if you walk away from the Magen Avram, you could put fish and meat together. Nobody would do this. Any restaurant or any hechsher would not give a hechsher to fish and meat together. But Ayin Darkei Tshuva, the Darkei Tshuva, who is the first Munkacher Rebbe, he says, "Shegedoylei achronim tzirfu es dvarav l'snif lahakol." They quoted this Magen Avram as a sniff. A sniff lahakol, if you're learning psak, sniff lahakol means that it's a factor, that you could include that as part of your factor to be lenient. As long as there's other significant reasons to be makel, you could rely on the Magen Avram in addition. So first of all, to start off the shayla, the Magen Avram is not so confident that it's a problem ichlal. Okay, number two, this sauce, the amount of fish in the sauce is nullified by shishim. So even if the fish that's in the anchovies that's in the sauce, gets placed on the meat, it's going to be shishim. See, here's the question. Normally, when something is batal b'shishim, it's fine. Is that true by fish and meat as well? When something, milk and meat is batal b'shishim, is fish and meat also batal b'shishim? You'd say, well, of course, if milk and meat is batal b'shishim, kal v'chomer, this is not even an isser. On the other hand, if I were to tell you there's a pot of soup, and I say that there's one drop of poison, but don't worry, there's shishim, you'd say you're crazy. Of course not, right? You would never touch that. So there's a shaila in the Achroinim, are we more machmer with fish and meat? So says Rav Shechter, Ayin sham bepischei tshuva, gedarkei tshuva, shenechliku apoiskim linian hach sakana, that they argue about this sakana, the basar v'dog shenes bashlu, that you have fish and meat together, but it's batal b'shishim, is it still a problem? Im yesh lochush afilu k'she'ein adog noisin tam behechsher, that it's batal b'shishim, is it still a problem? It's a machloikes. K'varn is batal b'shishim. Now, most shitas, v'das isa v'heter, v'roi v'apoiskim l'halka b'zeh. Most opinions are mekel. Most opinions say that fish and meat is batal b'shishim. Although it is a medical issue, no, we're not going to be more strict than the Torah. So first of all, it's batal b'shishim. Now you'll say, well, even if it's batal b'shishim, who says you should lichachila be mavatal it? The concept of this is a separate issue, and the reason why I like to go through this because it picks up a lot of concepts in kashrus. Let's say I have milk and I want to just drop in a tiny bit of milk into the chulin because I want to add a little bit of flavor, but don't worry, it's batal b'shishim. So it won't aser the pot, but you're not allowed to do this. It's called ein mevatlin iser lichachila. You're not allowed to lichachila place isurim together even at a ratio of shishim. So over here, even if I'm taking the fish, but even though it's batel, I'm still actively beginning the process of placing it on the steak sauce. And the Rabbanim have to think about this because if I'm not allowed to do this, they should not give a hechsher to something that I'm going to do. It's labeled as steak sauce. So am I allowed to take some of the fish? That's, again, it's going to be shishim. It's always batal b'shishim because it's batal b'shishim within the sauce, but I'm putting it on the steak. Says Rav Shechter, and he says, v'roi v'apoiskim v'hakol oid loymar. It's not even a problem of ein mevatlin isel l'chachila. It's completely fine. You're allowed to lichachila, take fish that is nullified in shishim and place it onto meat. So you have all of these sources together. Al-Kain, therefore, Rav Shechter says, this is my opinion. Bevade lahanik hechsher l'sos kazeh, you can give a hechsher to this for sure. Shetam adog sheboy kvar nisbatel b'shishim, because again, it's batel b'shishim. Afilu im nitfes ala pesek shala bikbak shu steak sauce. Even though they write on the thing, it's labeled as steak sauce, so you know what people are going to do. They're going to put it on meat. Umemela move on sheroy v'koyne, most people purchasing it yarvu oisay bebasar v'dog. Why is it allowed? Because you have the Magen Avram, Imdasa Isa V'heter. You have all of these shitas that it might not be a problem anymore, and it's batal b'shishim, and you're allowed to do it lichachila. So all of this is fine. Now, by the way, you don't have to put under the OU, OU pariv. You don't have to write OU fish. You don't have to do this. The reason being is because it's batal b'shishim. As we're going to see in a moment from Rebelsky, if let's say the amount of anchovies in the sauce is not nullified by shishim, so it's mamish, got a lot of fish in there, you would have to actually write OU fish. But Rav Shechter says it's batal b'shishim, so it's fine. You don't have to write OU fish. And he says, "Ve'elu ve'ein min atzarich lahad v'stach za'oyu sheish b'dagim ve'elu akonim sherotz lahachma b'zeh v'shaloi l'shtamish b'sos hazel l'bishol basar yuchlayim b'rishimas hamachilim shal pesach." If people want to avoid it, they could look at the ingredients. It says fish in the ingredients, and that's it. You don't have to write on the OU as long as it's listed in the ingredients. If people want to be machmer, you have to give people the opportunity to be machmer. But as long as they have the opportunity, I don't have to be more strict. V'likra sheish by anchovies v'sulay midi. That's Tzvi Schechter in Tafshin Nun Gimel, is 1993. So in that letter, they then sent it to Rav Belsky, and for whatever reason, Rav Belsky, 12 years later, wrote an addendum. And Rav Belsky added, he said as follows, Kvar hadati, this is all on that document, Kvar hadati denichali betalacha now, I've already showed that I'm okay with the approach that was listed before. I agree with Rav Schechter that if, as long as the fish is nullified 1 in 60, I'm sorry, this means where there's so much fish that it's not even in shishim, meaning it's not nullified in the tube. So there's, let's say, 10% fish. Sheyesh l'samna b'tevas fish. You have to actually write next to the OU fish. But if it's nullified in the sauce, ein sarich. You just have to write in the ingredients. So far the same. But Rav Belsky says, I want to add one point, and this is what the OU listen to this. But I had a maisa, so I'd like to make one point clarified. Sheyesh livdak. Again, you have to write in the ingredients that there's fish. He says, Yesh livdak eich reshmu v'en amachilim. You have to check how they write it in the ingredients. Ki ba'uvda shemarav and shemen shel omega-3. Sometimes it's fish, but it doesn't come from fish. I mean, it is fish, but it's not labeled as fish. It's labeled as omega-3. This is like in Amol, when my father's day, when they used to check the ingredients. Whey, W-H-E-Y, is a derivative of, it comes from a cow, it comes from milk. So it comes from milk, whatever. It's part of the process of, it's dairy, the kids are. But people didn't know this. So they're just looking for milk or dairy. It says whey, so it's fine. So Rebelsky says, you have to make sure that it says fish, not omega. Because, and then Rebelsky says, Regilim lirsham rakshem Hashem and lodugim omega-3 oils. They just write omega-3 oils. Ubam esarach lichlev sheyesh dogim. You have to write there's fish. Betoich hamachilim, in middle of the ingredients, lichte beferish tebas dogim. You have to write the word dogim. Oishem hadog. Ubildi zel yavinu sheshman sheshem and zehumin hadog. That's Rebelsky's addition. And based on this is what the OU makes their policy. Again, the reason why I wanted to go through this, although I sort of mentioned this last time, is because now you see, and we'll take questions at the end if it's not mine, and you see now this is the foundation of how the psak works. So you take all these concepts, and then they mamish broke it down, and this is how it's practically done. So one more point I want to mention, and then we'll go weiter, is, so I mentioned last time that the Mechaber brings down not in the Mechaber, in the Beis Yosef, he says not to eat fish and milk. But it's not listed in the Shulchan Aruch, which, by the way, pretty glaring omission, that kind of gives credence that it might be a mistake, it might be a printing error, because it's not listed anywhere in the Shulchan Aruch, it's written in the Beis Yosef. Taz, Shach, Ramah, lenient. So I mentioned last time that the Pischei Tshuva brings down that there were, the Rabbeinu Bechai is Machmer, and I mentioned that the Ben Ish Chai, so the Ben Ish Chai and Rav Avadia are strict. Outside of butter, they're machmer by outside of cheese for cheese and milk. They're machmer not by butter, but bekitzer there is a chomer by the Sfardim. They don't have fish and cheese together. So I was talking to David. He said, I heard that Ashkenazim are also machmer. So I wanted to mention. So I looked into it. Actually, Chabad. I won't put you on the spot. Not machmer, right? I don't think so either. I haven't heard that either. I'm not that Chabad, but I'm Chabad enough to pick up these type of things. But I will say this. So I print on the paper is a Tshuvas Emek HaTshuva. Emek HaTshuva were the Tshuvas of Dayan Roth, Rav Yechezkel Roth. He was a Satmar Dayan, big Talmid Chacham in Brooklyn. And he writes over here the following, Chelik Vav Siman Shin Ches. So you asked me about Ashkenazim. There are some Ashkenazim more strict. I heard Belz is strict, but this is Mefurish, Satmar. The Dayan Roth was very close to Satmar Rebbe's. He would not paskin Keneged Satmar. He was, he had that. He was a stark Satmar Chassid. He writes over here, B'davar sheila seich, I got your shaila, sheyesh min machal she'osim migvina v'dagim mu'urav yachad, that there's this food on the market, which is a combination of fish and cheese, she'korin kam cream cheese in lox, and he says, v'yesh rabbanim shenoisem as a hechsher, and the rabbanim give a hechsher to such a thing. He says, Kefisha chararti nochen hadavar shata oimesh, yesh rabbanim shenoisem hechsher. He said, I looked into it, there's taka hechsher on cream cheese in lox, ube'emes hadavar tumur ma'oid. I'm shocked, says Dayan Roth, eich Loi choshu lezeh. How could they give a hechsher to something? Ki me'olam b'chol batei Yisrael. Just shows you the world that you're in. B'chol batei Yisrael, in every Jewish home, nizharu shleilecha dogma v'vini yachdav. They don't eat fish and cheese together. So how can you give a hechsher to such a thing? Someone who's careful should not eat such a thing. So it's just interesting. So Satmar, definitely strict. Just again, it's interesting, anecdotes. I guess there are some Ashkenazim who are machmer not to eat fish. And again, pashtus, the reason why I think many people are megal, especially after reading Rav Shechter, this whole thing may not even apply by fish and meat. The whole thing by fish and meat, the Magen Avram 500 years ago was already questioning the validity of it. So now we're going to start adding it to potentially a printing error. Okay, no, that's where the Ashkenazim are coming from, outside of, I guess, Satmar and other. I think Belz is also machmer. Fine. Now back to this is actually the only thing that is going to be on the Shulchan Aruch, and this is the Ramah had discussed the concept of Maaris Ayin, and when Maaris Ayin applies, when does not apply. Again, you do have the shach in the sheet, but if you want to see it inside, we're going to go through it in Sifkat and Vav. So the concept of Maaris Ayin, we saw this in the Ramah. The concept of Maaris Ayin is that you're not allowed to do something that looks inappropriate. It looks like you're doing something wrong. You're not allowed to do something that looks like you're doing something wrong. So the Ramah said, where's the source of Maaris Ayin for milk and meat? There is no source for milk and meat by Maaris Ayin. The source is, as we'll see in a moment, fish blood. We sort of referenced it last time. You're not allowed min haTorah, you're not allowed to drink cow blood. Fish blood is allowed. Fish blood is allowed. But if you're drinking a cup of fish blood, I don't know that you're drinking fish blood. Maybe you're drinking cow blood. It looks bad. It's a Maaris Ayin. So the Rashba says, as we'll see in a moment, the Rashba says you have to put scales in the fish blood so that everyone knows that it's fish blood. Beautiful. So based on this, says the Ramah, v'nogu la'asais cholav mishkedim. They would take almond milk, u'menichem babasar oif, and they would take chicken and cook it in the almond milk. Now, why is that okay? L'chora, it's Maaris Ayin. Because here's the Ramah Shita, as we'll see in a moment, it's a debate. The Ramah Shita is, Maaris Ayin is only a problem if what it looks like you're doing is an Isser Daraisa. Maaris Ayin means that it looks like you're doing something wrong. So does that always apply? Not so pashut. It only applies that if what I'm doing is taka as bad as it looks, if it's an Isser Daraisa, I can't do such a thing. But if what it looks like I'm doing is an Isser Darabanan, then it's fine. You see, the case of the fish blood, it looks like I'm drinking cow blood. It's an Issa Deraisa. You go into a church, it looks like you're going to pray. It's also Maaris Ayin. That's the issue of going into a church. It's a problem of Maaris Ayin. I'm not going to do this. This is Akadekach to go so off the tangent, but you should just know. I got asked last week about, again, the front part is the Beis Yosef. You got to go to the back section. Remember? Same thing. So I got asked last week about going into a church for an AA meeting. Again, there are poskim that are mekel. Even though it's because it's a Maaris Ayin issue, it's a very strong Maaris Ayin, but it's a Maaris Ayin issue. Going to a church, it looks like you're going to pray. Again, there's heterim, but potentially, maybe. But the point is, it's a problem Maaris Ayin. Because it looks like I'm doing this at Daraisa. So if I'm taking meat and cooking it in the almond milk, so what it looks like I'm doing is an Issa Daraisa, then it's a problem Maaris Ayin. But if I'm taking chicken and putting it in almond milk, where even if what I'm doing, they judge me inappropriately, and a taka looks as bad as it is, it's only an Issa Darabanan. Chicken and milk is an only Issa Darabanan. So therefore, there's no Maaris Ayin on an Issa Darabanan. That's in the terminology of the Poskim. There's no Maaris Ayin on an Issa Darabanan. So Zakta Ramah, v'nogu lasas cholav mishkedim, u'menicham babasar oif, and you cook chicken in the almond milk. Ve'ina rak b'darabanan, because the whole thing is only darabanan. Aval basar behema, but beef in almond milk, yesh laniach yitzal cholav shkedim. You have to put almonds out. Mishum Maaris Ayin. Because of Maaris Ayin. And I did mention last time, as we'll see, we'll talk a little bit about it. I was going to go through, but as Akadekach, I didn't want to take too long. The Rebelsky said when he was asked about putting fake cheese on giving a hechsher to, meat, and I think it was like a Subway that had fake cheese on it. He said that it's okay as long as it says on the menu that it's vegan or whatever, fake. Not many people are seeing the menu. It's not like it's giant words. So he said, well, how many people are going to notice the almonds when you walk into a house on Friday afternoon and she's cooking? How many people are going to notice the almonds? Not that much. It's in the kitchen. It's amongst all the other ingredients. What's the answer? Says Rebelsky, you don't need a lot. Klal Yisrael are supposed to judge each other favorably. You just got to give us a chance. So as long as the almonds are there, it's not the biggest starkest Siman in the world. So as long as it's written somewhere on the menu or on the receipt, no, that's fine. Okay, so according to the Ramah, there's no Maaris Ayin on an Issa D'Rabbanan. Which, by the way, when the fake ice cream, the Tafudi ice cream and all these things came out originally, is it a problem to serve it after a meat meal? So the Ramah would say it's fine, right? If you eat dairy after meat, not together, not cooked together, if I have a burger and then I have ice cream, it's not an Issa D'Oraisa, it's an Issa D'Rabbanan at most. I don't even know if it's an Issa D'Rabbanan. It's an Issa D'Rabbanan at most. It's not cooked together. So, and the Ramah holds there's no Maaris Ayin in Issa D'Rabbanan. So according to the Ramah, there's no problem of non-dairy ice cream, fake ice cream. Again, nowadays we'll see there's a heter. Nowadays the heter is that it's subjective. Maaris Ayin is subjective. It changes as the time goes on, as we'll see in a moment. But the point is, even when it came out originally, the Ramah would say it's fine. Now the question is the Ramah universally accepted? So you look at the Shach, this is the Shach and Sifkat and Vav. I don't think we're going to get past these pages. I think the pages is probably all we'll get to today. The Shach writes in Sifkat and Vav that he disagrees with the Ramah. He begins by describing the Ramah's opinion, and then, as we'll see in a moment, he doesn't necessarily agree with the Ramah. And the Shach holds that there is Maaris Ayin even on an Issa D'Rabbanan. And as we're going to see, the rise of the Shach are pretty strong. Like, we got to explain the Ramah a little bit. So the Shach writes like this in Sifkat and Vav. Kaloimar. What is the concept of the Ramah? Loi dami l'dam dagim. You see, the source of Maaris Ayin is the fish blood. Soif Siman Samich Vav. Shemuta legamri. Fish blood is entirely permissible. Va'afilu hachi. It's in the shita if you need. Va'afilu hachi. And even though it's entirely permissible because it's fish blood, im konsu bekli. If they're in a cup, meaning if you listen, I know that people here do this. If you just want to take a fish and just suck the blood right out, that's fine. But you want to put in a cup because we're civilized people. So that the Ramah says, im konsu bekli aser, right? Mipnei Maaris Ayin. Because to have it in a cup, then it's a problem because it looks like cow blood. El im keni ish by kaskasim. So you have to put in scales. Shenikrshu dam dagim. Why? So says the Ramah speaks this out. He doesn't write this, but he understands this. Dahasam dam gufe asa deraisa. Over there, what it looks like I'm doing is drinking cow blood, which is an asa deraisa. Hilka charoya yoymar da'achal dam bahema shasam deraisa. Aval basar oif b'chalav mamish. But to take chicken, which even if I were to cook it in milk, is only an asa derabanan l'chol hayoyser. Therefore, there's no Maaris Ayin on an Issa D'Rabbanan. But you have to put it out, the almonds, you have to put it out when you're cooking with beef. Because beef and milk milk looks like an almond milk looks like an Issa D'Oraisa. The Ramah writes this in his Sefer Teres Chatas, which is a sefer that he dedicated to these topics. And by the way, the Shach points out the Ramah would only say this, that you have to put out almonds if you're cooking the meat in the almond milk. But if you're having a glass of almond milk and a steak where they're not cooked together, it's weiter only in Issa D'Rabbanan, then it's not going to be a problem. You wouldn't have to put out almonds there. Oh, this is all the Ramah's opinion. It's not so pashut. The Marshal says, I don't know. I look at the fish blood. I'm not focused on the deraisa derabanan. I'm just focused on Maaris Ayin as a Maaris Ayin. I look at the fish blood that he would apparently apply it to Purim. Apparently in Purim, in the location of the Marshal in Ashkenaz, what they would do is the minhag was on Purim. They would cook chicken in almond milk. That was their dish. So says the Marshal, that's a problem. You have to put almonds out. You have to put it in the dish and outside of the dish. By the way, first of all, he holds it's a problem by D'Rabbanan, but he also says chicken, as we're going to see, we wait 6 hours by chicken. We usually don't treat chicken that much more lenient, even though it's D'Rabbanan. We try to be strict. Because we're afraid that there was a sheet of the Tanoim, Rav Yossi Haglili. We don't pass this way. He actually held that chicken and milk is mutter. So we're always kind of afraid of his shita. We don't want people to learn too much about it. So we are always strict with chicken. Wait 6 hours. We don't eat on the same table as dairy. All these halachas as we'll get to. So says the Marshal, I think it's a problem by chicken as well. Almond milk. That's the accepted the psak of the achronim. And says the Shach, I believe that's my opinion as well. Afilu midid derabana, because the Shach says you should know kol terakula. We are generally strict by isurim derabana that there is Maaris Ayin. I'll prove it to you. Bekama duchte. I'll prove it to you. Now this is a pella, because the Ramah did not miss Mishnayos. The Ramah didn't miss anything, but he sure as heck did not miss Mishnayos. There's a Mishnah in Shabbos. What does the Mishnah in Shabbos say? B'shas perek b'ameh behema v'loy bezug afal pishu pokuk mishod nemichsi command the ozel lechinga. You're not allowed to walk out with your animal with a bell around its neck. I want to walk out with a camel with a bell around its neck on Shabbos. I can't. Why? Because it looks like I'm taking it to the market. They would wear bells around their neck to the market. And it looks like I'm taking them to sell. Maaris Ayin, it looks like I'm not keeping Shabbos the way I should. Let me ask you a question. What's the Isser on Shabbos of commerce? It's not one of the Lamites. It's an Isser D'Rabbanan. If you sell someone, you might come to write it down. It's not one of the 39 Malachas. So the whole thing's an Isser D'Rabbanan. It looks like I'm about to do an Isser D'Rabbanan. It looks like I'm going to sell my cow, even though selling the cow is only an Isser D'Rabbanan. It's a Mishnah in Shabbos, says the Shach. Pella. Put that question on the side. The Ramah does not miss Mishnayos. Okay. But he says, Pirush Rashi, L'shuk, Limkar, V'hainu Maaris Ayin, K'disa Perek Ma'behema, V'u Muska Mechol HaPoiskin. This is brought down, by the way. The Ramah himself brings us down in Hilchos Shabbos. Okay. U'kamosh Bar Barachayim, Siman Shin Av B'Sheisa Merkachu Memker B'Shabbos, Eino Midrabanan. Even though commerce on Shabbos is only Nisa D'Rabbanan. Kamosh Kosav Barachayim, B'Choshem Mishpat. And by the way, he says, V'chein Muchach L'Hedi B'Taisvis. Taisus also holds this way. Now, he doesn't say what this Taisus is. I don't normally do this, but I happen to be, thank God, I happen to remember this Taisus is brought down by Rabbi Alacha. If you look, I brought this down in the sheets. It's Kedai. We pass him like this Taisus, by the way. The Shulchan Aruch passes like this Taisus. The Mishavura passes like this Taisus. This Taisus is mafurish that there is a Maaris Ayin and a D'Rabbanan. It's actually a very Yisaidistic Taisus because we pass him this way. If you look on the sheets, it's on the second side, the second paragraph of Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch writes in Hilchos Shabbos, Siman Shin Aleph, Sif Mem Hey. Misha Nishu Kelev B'Mayim. Let's say you're caught in a rainstorm, okay, and your clothing is soaking. So you have a clothesline. You want to just put your clothes on the line to dry. So says the Shulchan Aruch, first you can wear the clothes and we're not concerned that you'll wring them out, fine. You can't hang clothing to dry. Nowadays, you could put it on the back of a door, that the place can be more lenient, but if you have like a clothing line, you can't hang your clothing to dry. Why not? Because it looks like you did laundry on Shabbos. Looks like you did laundry. Okay, by the way, this is an Issa Deraisa. It looks like you did laundry, which is an Issa Deraisa. So far, it's not related. Stark. But says the Shulchan Aruch, V'afilu b'chadrei chadarim. Let me ask you a question. The whole problem of Maaris Ayin is that it looks bad. There's nobody around. Who am I concerned about? Says the Shulchan Aruch, even in the privacy of your home, and there's nobody there, you can't hang up clothing. Why? Maaris Ayin is a problem even when no one's around. Okay, where does he get this from? So look at the Mishbura. Hatam toichilku chacham b'taknosan. Chazal, when they said Maaris Ayin is a problem, they applied it even when no one's around. Okay, Kosvu hataisus. But says Taisvis, now the Mishabura doesn't say where this is, but the Be'er Halacha says this is the Taisvis that the Shach is referring to. It's brought down by Mishabura. Says Taisvis, the Mechaber is telling you that Maaris Ayin applies even when no one's around. Says Taisvis, not so pashut. If it's an Issa D'Oraisa, what it looks like you're doing, then it's a problem if no one's around. If it's an Issa D'Rabbanan, then it's okay if nobody's around. So what do you see from Taisvis? It says, look at the Mishabura. The Mishabura says, Kasva Taisvis v'harosh. Dafka, this concept of the Mechaber, that if no one's around, it's a problem, is dafka b'makom sheyesh chashash. It's dafka a situation where what it looks like I'm doing is sheichshdu aron shasa issa deraisa. It looks like I'm doing an issa deraisa, like laundry. Then it's a problem even if no one's around. But if it's Maaris Ayin on issa derabanan, says Taisvis, it's allowed if no one's around, but it's a problem if there are people there. What do you see from Taisvis? And this is, by the way, you see from Taisus that Maaris Ayin applies on Nisa D'Rabbanan. Again, albeit you'll have the heter that if no one's around, it's okay. But if there are people there, it's a problem. So says the Shach, Taisus holds not like you. Not like the Rama. You see it's from Taisus, there is Maaris Ayin Nisa D'Rabbanan. By the way, just Agav, it didn't put it on the sheets, but do they not have Pischei Tshuva in this Shulchan Aruch? Can you pass me the Shulchan Aruch for one second? That's crazy. No, that's one. Shiur. Yeah. Shiur. Which one do you So I'm sorry. I should have had this before. The Pischei Tshuva writes in Yud Cholav Shkedim, and he says, "Ein leser aliniach basar b'cholav shkedim b'lishin." I'm sorry. Elam hu b'fnei haroyim, k'may b'sudas gedolah. He quotes that he thinks that it's only a problem of almond milk with chicken. He addresses this machlekes and he says it's only a problem if there are people around. Now, according to Taisus, it makes a lot more sense. Because Taisus' whole point is that Maaris Ayin applies on Nissa D'Rabbanan if there are people around. If it's a Nissa D'Oraisa, it would apply if nobody's around. But if it's Nissa D'Rabbanan, it applies only if there are people around. But Kitzer, what do you see from this? You see from this, says the Shach, clear from Taisus, there is Maaris Ayin, by Hilchos Shabbos, by the kibbutz, by the clothing line. The Mishnah in Shabbos says the Maaris Ayin applies on Nissa D'Rabbanan with the market. So therefore ends the Shach. I'm sorry. And this is accepted. So the rest of it we'll just do over here to the sheets. So first, the Shach disagrees with the Ramah, and he believes the Maaris Ayin applies even on Nissa D'Rabbanan. So ice cream and all these things, non-dairy creamers would all be a problem, because even though you're not cooking it with meat, it would be a problem. Just before we address the practical psak nowadays, I mean, it's a pretty peladik azach that the Ramah is missing Mishnayos. He doesn't miss Mishnayos. Mishnah in Shabbos is mefurish that there's Maaris Ayin. So the Aruch HaShulchan addresses this in Siman Pei Zayin Sif Tes Zayin. The Aruch HaShulchan says, "V'li nira the me'isa Shabbos ein lomod." You can't learn out from Hilchos Shabbos. Hilchos Shabbos, Yisurim D'Rabbanan are very, very severe. You know what the psak is by Hilchos Shabbos? If a Jew is mechal Shabbos on Nissa D'Rabbanan, pashtus, he has the status of a guy, he can't touch your wine, even though it's only Nissa D'Rabbanan. When it comes to Shabbos, Chil Shabbos is so severe that we are strict even on Yisurim D'Rabbanan. So it could be the Ramah is right. There is no Maaris Ayin in Nissa D'Rabbanan. The Mishnah in Shabbos, Taisus, those are Hilchos Shabbos. We don't learn out Shabbos to other things. That's the Aruch HaShulchan says, Ramban, Chol Yisur Shabbos D'Rabbanan K'deraisa. So therefore, it answers the question on the Ramah. The Ramah is not confusing. He knew this Mishnah, but he doesn't learn out things from Hilchos Shabbos. Good. Now, just for the record, when it comes to nowadays, there's always an accepted concept that when it comes to Maaris Ayin, it's subjective. And as time goes on, once people know that what you're doing is probably okay, it doesn't apply anymore. And that's why nowadays, they'll have non-dairy ice cream after a fleishik meal, and the caterer doesn't bring out, the label. Because nowadays, everyone knows it's an option. So it's always just understood that by Maaris Ayin, it's sort of subjective. And that's why I once gave a shiur on, they asked, Rav Shawai says a tshuva about going into a treif restaurant for a business meeting. That's a problem with Maaris Ayin, but is it okay nowadays? And he said that nowadays he believes that it's so common that it's now shifted over to permissible. It's like you need enough people to jump in the bath for it to become permissible. So I just say this is also a tshuva, this is like, I forgot the number, I don't know if it's F24, F51, whatever it was. But this is a tshuva, it's in English, I'll read it through, obviously everyone can understand this. But there's a nuance. The big poskim is Rav Shechter and Rebelsky. But the Rav who would write down their opinions and codify it, his name is Rav Eli Gersten. He's still the Rav now, and if you have like a question to the email, like I've emailed him before, he responds. So he writes as follows. He picks up something I never picked up before. And he says that Rav Shechter is mechadish, basically, that this concept that it's subjective, because where do you find something subjective? When Chazal asks something, they ask something. So what do you have to say? They only asked it because it looked bad. Okay, I guess so. Rav Shechter felt no. Rav Shechter feels that it's only a problem of Maaris Ayin is only subjective, by things that are not mefurish in Shas. Meaning, the Shas never answered, the Gemara never addressed milk and meat. Even the Rishonim never addressed milk and meat with almond milk. They addressed fish blood. We've extended it. Extensions are subjective. That's what Shechter Shita. Again, Pashtus, the most poskim assume everything's subjective, but he says, I discussed with Rav Shechter your question on cheeseburgers, and the following is a summary of how I understood his position. There are shitas that hold that we're only aser mishum Maaris Ayin, that which Chazal forbade. I mean, there is a shita that we don't extend Maaris Ayin to anything other than Shas. Now, we obviously don't hold that way because the Ramah mentioned it by almond milk, even though there's no reference in Shas for this. Going into a non-kosher restaurant, there's no reference in Shas. It's a reference of Shas going into a church. So he said, there are shita which Chazal forbade, we don't make up our own isurim. The Ramah clearly does not hold this way, and he requires a heker for meat cooked in almond milk. But because it is not an isur of Chazal, it is dependent on how much of a chashad there exists. It's subjective. There is a subject to change. When par of non-dairy creamers first entered the market, they were not permitted at weddings unless they were served from the original bottle, so everyone could see that it was not milk. But today, everyone knows there is par of milk, and there's no longer any chash isur. Had this been a Gzeres Chazal, then it would not be subject to change. That's a big chiddush of Rav Shechter, by the way. Again, most opinions just assume that it is subject to change by all Maaris Ayin, but Rav Shechter disagrees. But since it is simply dependent on the chashashos of other people, it is subject to change. Rav Shechter said, Be'ikr, Kids, I'll just say this outside. Be'ikr, when they were asking of Shechter, it's on the same document of Rebelsky about the cheeseburger and writing on the menu. Rav Shechter was saying, how much do you have to publicize it to write on the menu that it's non-dairy, cheese, whatever? So Rav Shechter said, the purpose of writing it is not the almonds. I mean, Rebelsky was looking at it as that writing it is the akin to the almonds, that it's a problem, and I need to remove the problem by publicizing it's okay. Putting almonds there, writing it. Rav Shechter said that's not a pshat. We just have to make sure that it's now known in the Welt that there are non-dairy cheese. One of the ways to publicize that is I could put it on my WhatsApp status or I could write it on the menu. Once it's well known, then you don't even have to write it on the menu anymore. I mean, the reason why you're writing it on the menu is not to remove this chashash, it's to make it public knowledge, and then the chashash automatically never exists anymore. And that's be'ikr the heter. Okay, one more thing. Sorry, 9:36. I apologize. One more thing. We'll end with this. I'm not going to go on to the next one because it's a whole sugya, and we'll do it at the beginning of next week. But I want to finish the sheet. I've mentioned this many, many times. I think it's just kedai to see it inside. It's a longer tshuva, but I like this one paragraph because it shows you the galus or Moshe finds it. I had this happen with me, and I remember the grace difference between me and Gad Yisrael. I showed them the Ramosha to make them feel bad, but you'll see the case. The case was Ramosha was once in a car. I've mentioned this tshuva many, many times. I think it's kedai to see. This is in Igros Moshe Orach Chaim Chilek Aleph Siman Tzadivav. Ramosha was told by someone that what he did was wrong. Moshe Feinstein, Amud of Hira, and they said to him that it's a problem that you got in a car after candlelighting. It's Maaris Ayin. It looks bad to get in a car after candlelighting. So I had this once when I was in Bergenshire. I used to go to the late mincha, but I would learn during the early mincha, and I would write notes. So I'm sitting like a hat and jacket writing notes, and people came over to me and said, you shouldn't be writing notes when it's already Shabbos. I'm like, we haven't done mincha yet. Like, yeah, but it's close to Shabbos. I was like, if it's Shabbos, you shouldn't be davening mincha. And I did not do it with the grace of Ramosha. I just showed them this, and I was like, I won't write anymore. But you're all idiots. But Kitzer, Ramosha, look at Ramosha's tshuva. Ramosha writes like this: Nanesi ma'od. Ramosha said, I was very happy. Asher mareches kvoidcha. Mareches kvoidcha is sir, whoever's writing to me. Nizdariz l'kayim is techacha l'fidaita. I'm impressed that you're trying to mekayim the mitzvah to the best of your ability of giving musar. And he's not being facetious. He says, Uchuaschein l'mareches kvoidcha, and you should be very, good for you. Hooray. I can't say it not sounding sarcastic, but good for you. I'm not upset. And he says, you should know, I won't do this anymore. Even though there's not even a remnant of an isser, and there's no problem Maaris Ayin. Ramesh is machadish a big chiddush. Why is it no Maaris Ayin? He says like this: Ki yoda yedidi asher isser Maaris Ayin hu rak bedavar shenasa ze beroiv hapamim ba'ofen ha'aser v'oises ze ba'ofen ha'muter. Also means Maaris Ayin. Maaris Ayin only applies to something that is normally done prohibited, but you happen to be doing it in a permissible way. The way I always describe it, it's something that Rabbi Obam and Rabbi Welcher would say that doesn't look right. Meaning, a big Talmid Chacham would look at it and say, shouldn't be doing this. Cooking meat in almond milk looks bad. It doesn't look bad to an ignorant person. It looks bad to Rabbonim alike. Says Ramosha, that's Maaris Ayin. But, and he says, K'moy b'nishu kelev b'mayim. Oh, see, you learn enough. It's all referencing. Like the example of hanging up your clothing that the Mechaber brings down in Siman Shin Aleph, it looks like you did laundry. A rabbi sees you doing laundry or looks like doing laundry. That's a problem. This is the line. But to do something permissible, mefursum, that's clearly mutter. Because there are some people that are ignorant. Maaris Ayin does not mean catering to people that are ignorant. It means catering to people that know the halacha and attack it still looks bad. So he says, he says every child knows women are Mekabel Shabbos with candlelighting, not men. And therefore, for me to get in the car after candlelighting, which is an irrelevant fact for a man, he says it's known that it's mutter, so it's not Maaris Ayin. I won't do it, he continues. He says, I won't do it because if it bothers you, for cover for you, I won't do it anymore, but you should know there's no problem with Maaris Ayin. Maaris Ayin does not mean chashash of someone ignorant. Maaris Ayin means doing something that even a learned person would say, that doesn't look right. I will stop here, and Bez Hashem next week we'll pick it up.